Hello, so this is a review for exam number 2 for 201-301. So if you remember, the first exam was the 5 C's and STP, and then exam 2 is going to be product and promotion. So just to be a little bit more specific, um, we did product, which includes branding, then we did promotions, traditional promotions, and we are about to do digital. So then your exam is basically on product branding, promotions, and digital marketing. Since we are in the fall break and some of you have been absent to some important classes, that's why I'm doing this review. All right, so let's start with product and branding. So let's move to our product section. So what is product, or what's part of product? Pro Product includes everything to do with physical product. If it's a physical, we also have services, which is non-physical. So basically, it's variety, quality, design, features, branding, packaging, and services. Because even if it's not a service, most products these days have a service as part of it. So when it comes to product, the first thing we need to look at is breadth, product mix breadth, depth, and then each of the items within each product line, meaning the SKU or stock keeping unit. So let's look at an example. So here we have for Apple, they don't have that many product lines, so this is their depth of products. And then within each one, well, this is a little old iPhone, they don't have that many versions of each one. Now, the first concept that is really important is the actual product. It's basically the features, the design. Packaging has become a huge part of, especially of Apple, quality, and sometimes this may be perceived quality and brand, right? So branding is very much with the image of that brand. And as we saw with the single product blind test that we did for waters, most of you chose Smart Water, even though half of you couldn't tell them apart with the other waters. Now, augmented product, if means it increases the the perceived value or the customer value of the product because you do other things that come when you buy this product: after sales service, warranty, product support, delivery credit. So this is, where one of the reasons why Apple, or why many of you are so loyal to Apple, because they do a great job, not only the product itself, but also all these augmented product features. So we have different types of products. You have convenience products, shopping, specialty, and on-sale. So convenience is basically the what you buy frequently or every week. Think of your shopping trip, right? And the type of usually is not a high involvement, it's a low involvement customer involvement. So that means relatively low price, toothpaste, magazines, laundry, so all the things you usually buy, they're usually sold in mass. Um, so they're mostly in retailers. You can also buy them online. And then you have things that are less frequently purchased. These have higher price, selective distribution, so you're not going to find, well, still, things like TVs, furniture, and clothing in a supermarket, but you can definitely find them in a mass merchandiser like Target or Walmart. So here, personal selling becomes more important, right? Because if you're buying these things, then you may need the help of salespeople. But not always, right? So all of these things, it depends. IKEA has a model where there is nobody there to really help you. and that's why it's a low cost producer. Okay, so then you have specialty products. Specialty products, these are higher price, so these are luxury goods like Rolex watches and so on. So this does require more selling. You're not gonna go into a jewelry where they sell Rolex watches and not have anybody there to help you. And then these things that you're almost little or very, let's say, once or maybe twice during lifetime buy, things like life insurance and so on. So depending on the product, right, you may look at many of the different features that are part of that brand. So you have the attributes of the product, the brand, packaging, labeling, and support. So as we talked about, so this is the augmented services. Now, there are brands such as Colgate, where every brand basically has the same name, but they are under the same umbrella. And then you have services, right? So these are things that are intangible because they cannot be seen. Quality depends on who provides them. Services cannot be separated from providers, so it's very much linked who is providing the service. And it's something that you cannot store for later. Okay. Now, a big part of service is internal marketing. So what that means is, it's very difficult to have happy employees. Sorry, employees that provide really good service to your customers if they are unhappy. So typically, if you think of Apple, you see very motivated employees because they have, Apple has a very strong program when it comes to their employees. So again, it's not only Apple's marketing to its customers, but Apple's customer to the employees so that they are happy and provide a good service. So let's move on to branding. So the key thing is, why is it that so many brands disappear? Why is it that leading brands like Zenith, which basically dominated televisions in the 70s and 80s, are no longer around? And then you have brands like Sony that have lasted for pretty much forever. So what's going on? Why is it that some of these brands disappear? So if we look at Best Buys, so this was Best Buy in the 90s, probably recognize a couple of brands, and this is today. So the only brands from that list that are around, Samsung, which a very small brand, Toshiba, which also was a small brand, and well, Sony obviously still around. So what we learned from the Steve Jobs, um, think different uh, speech or marketing speech to his employees is this thing we're talking about internal marketing. You know, when Apple was about to go out of business, it had kind of lost its identity. And the big issue was that most of these products were inferior to its competition. So when Steve Jobs came back, he realized, well, it's not like I can really do much with these products. As a matter of fact, he did the opposite of what most would do. Most would do is launch new products to see if any of them work. He said, no, let's focus on a couple of them and make them really good. He actually got rid of 70%. Meanwhile, he needed a way to become relevant again. So, in a way to become relevant was the Think Different campaign. So, in a lot of ways, this was also about what's called a brand culture. Brand culture is what is the internal culture of the company as it stands to the brand. He keeps talking about how are we going to be remembered. So he doesn't talk about Apple as product. He talks Apple as people, and those people are the ones who are in the company. And then he extends those people to customers and influencers and pop culture. And he does all that with this very famous people that have quote unquote changed the world. Some of them are dead and some of them are alive. And the ones who are dead, if they had a computer, they would have used a Mac, paraphrasing what he said. So again, he's trying to basically communicate an identity. So when it comes to branding, right, we have this brand positioning, which we studied in the previous when we did STP. So, positioning has to do with the target, the benefits, and, reason to believe. And a lot of these benefits have to do with beliefs and values. There is a brand, and that brand typically is something that doesn't change over time. Um, and brands can be licensed or they could be manufactured or private labels. You can have line extensions. So we'll talk a little bit about each of these aspects. So again, you have the name and the logo. Logo can be very powerful, right? So here we have the probably most recognizable logo in the world, which is Nike. No need to even say the name. You immediately recognize the logo. Or Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, again, there are names that can be trademarked so that you can use them exclusively. Even packaging, right? So the visual shape of the Coke bottle, as you can see, it started over 100 years ago. Um, and then we have generic private label manufacturers. So manufacturer brands like Kellogg's, Frosted Flakes. But then we have Great Value, which is Walmart. And then the generic would be, like when you buy medications, it's not really a brand, like ibuprofen, right? Ibuprofen, and the brand would be Advil. Line extensions, again, for the same brand and same category, you may have different sizes and flavors. Or brand extension could be same brand but different product categories. So you have cheese and mayo. Now, packaging can be a very important aspect of branding because here we have Tide. Tide is just a blue liquid. So the branding and the identification really comes from the packaging. So here we see clearly the logo, the orange that everybody identifies with Tide. And then you have the back label with a lot of the regulatory information about, ingredients and so on. So what is a brand? It's a term, a name, a symbol, but most importantly, you it's the process of creating an identity. And over time, that's called brand equity. And part of that, the whole reason for it is because you want to create loyalty. So it starts with recognition, hopefully preference, and then insistence. And we'll look at a pyramid on how this works in a moment. So we have many examples of brands that really don't have tangible benefits. It has to do more with the beliefs, right? So there is a strong emotional connection with Disney and its customers. It has a trust level. And when it comes to Coca-Cola, the happiness, sharing, friendship, nothing to do with refreshment. So these are, again, there is Interbrand is the most famous company that does valuation of brands. So what it means is this: if this company did not have that brand, it would be worth a lot less because the brand has a lot of value. So this dynamic on how to build a brand a lot of times has to do with building, this called relationship. And it works very similar like people. First, do I know you? So at the beginning, there is a very weak relationship because I barely know you. Why should I care? Why are you relevant? Do you offer me something that I should care about? If so, can you deliver on your promise? And if you can deliver on that promise, is it better than what I currently use? If that's the case, then we may have a bonding, a bonding or strong relationship. But it doesn't happen in every category in every brand. So it's not uncommon, especially in low involvement categories where maybe you have, you don't mind when you buy oranges to switch between Florida Natural and Tropicana because you don't see that clear advantage or you don't have that huge loyalty. You basically um, buy those interchangeably. So the most famous model to understand why is it that some brands succeed and some don't is the young lubricant model. And it basically has four dimensions. Differentiation, okay, so this is how you're different, just like the word says, from your competition. Relevance, so this is, like it says, is it relevant to the segment? Is it pertinent to what you need today? Theme, which is the perceived quality, notice perceived. And then, well, even if you have those things, if people don't know you, then you have an issue. So differentiation, relevance, I would say to meeting the customer need, and we'll see it. So we have many examples of this. So we're talking about TVs, right? So TVs constantly have changed from different formats. You had the regular TVs, then you had first they started with black and white, and they were very, very big. And then you went to color, and then you went to plasma, which was the first format of flat screen, and then you went to high definition, and then went to LCDs, which basically lower the price, then 4K, 8K, OLED. So there is changes constantly. So if you don't keep up with those changes, then all of a sudden you become irrelevant. So how does this work? Well, the way it works is you have the current brand stature. So let's say the current value of the brand, and then its future potential. So the current stature has to do with knowledge and esteem. So remember, knowledge is awareness, and esteem is perceived quality. So if people know you and you have a very high perceived value, sorry, perceived quality, then you're in really good shape. But the problem is that in order to remain relevant, you have to constantly innovate and be able to differentiate versus your competition. And this is where a lot of brands fail and therefore disappear. So what Steve Jobs was trying to do is he knew everybody knew Apple, but the perceived quality had gone down. And even in terms of relevance, didn't think that was relevant anymore. And because there was no innovation, he needed to figure out a way to do these things without necessarily, an iPhone or an iPod or an Apple Watch. Those didn't come into much, much later. Okay. As a matter of fact, the iMac, which was the new Mac, it took like a year or two before it came out. So basically, he wanted to figure out a way to do this without a new product, and he was able to do it through that campaign. But that's usually very hard to do. Okay, so what happens typically? Okay, so here we have differentiation and relevance, and here we have STEAM and knowledge. So at the beginning, when you're new, you really need to focus here, differentiation and relevance. And that's how it usually starts, right? Because you're new, nobody knows you. Eventually, as people know you, maybe you become a niche or you have a segment of the population. And then once you are strong in all the factors, then you may reach leadership. So what happens is when these brands start eroding, it's because they become almost a commodity. So commodity means they lack differentiation. And we saw this clearly with a mini case study we did for Bose, right? So, but this is for Starbucks. But let's start with Bose first. So, Bose at the beginning, relatively unknown, okay, but huge differentiation. They had the only one with noise cancellation. But was noise cancellation relevant? Well, yes, but not in every case, okay? Because noise cancellation really was necessary for those situations where things were very noisy. So they became very well known, for example, in airplanes. But because they were so expensive, only like in first class. Later on, they realized through marketing that wait a minute, there is many situations that are noisy, and people did want noise cancellation, okay, and the perceived quality of Bose was unbeatable. So it was basically about how to work to get awareness. And they have reached some sort of leadership position. And when I say leadership, not necessarily of all headsets, but at least the premium segment. But that started deteriorating very quickly once they lost differentiation. And what was the main differentiation? Noise cancellation. And all the brands started having noise cancellation. And when that happened, not only did they lose that differentiation, but the other brands were able to differentiate much better than they did because they basically came in gray and black, and then you had Beats with Dr. Dre in different colors, and Apple, and the rest was history. So they still remain around, but they are nowhere near as big as they were. So you have many examples of situations where brands start declining, and then if they don't innovate, so here you have Gillette. So this is interesting. Gillette is owned by P&G. They continuously innovate. I would say they're probably back here in the leadership. Okay. And they what they have done is they also have acquired brands like the Art of Shaving, which are premium brands. Okay, they're niche, but it allows them to maintain that higher quality. All right. So just to wrap up on branding, notice that some of the most famous brands' logos don't change that much over time. So we talked already about this. The same brand in a same category is a line extension, same brand, new category is a brand extension, new brands, okay, in an existing category, that's multi-brand. So this is very much the P&G strategy. So most people don't know that P&G owns Tide, Gain, Cheer, Herbal Essence, Pantene, Head and Shoulders. These are all brands that it has. Or you have a completely new brand in a new category. So this could be Swiffer, right? So they invented a new brand in a new category. Okay, so we saw. So we also talked about new product introductions, starting with an idea, then screening, concept development, and so on. And here, what typically happens is, and this is the same thing that happened with startups, you have a initial period, the introduction, where it's not very profitable and it's very difficult to scale. Okay, and we'll see in a moment why. Now, again, the whole idea of marketing is to avoid this decline. But sometimes, if a brand doesn't innovate, then it may go into a decline. But it's not always the case. So here you have Crayola, 115 years. So we saw the example of the iPhone, right? So the iPhone, it had a completely different way of user interface, right? So it's touchscreen instead of keyboard. Now, let's skip almost this. So a lot of new products have a similar, or sometimes they're acquired, but new products usually go through some sort of um, process. So in entrepreneurship, the most famous, let's call it project management process, especially when technology is involved, is the lean startup. And the lean startup, basically what it says, you start with a vision of how you're going to solve a problem, right? A pain point. And then you develop quickly an MVP. An MVP is a minimum viable product. And then you start testing and learning. And then you go through this validation or rejection until you get to a point where either you continue, pivot, that means change the product, maybe the customer base, or maybe perish. So we saw in the McDonald's example how this MVP was created in a tennis court. Okay, so what happens in with startups is that you have different types of customers, and each one is a very different strategy to acquire them. So your innovators, these are, a lot of times like the techies, people who are willing to try new things or beta users. These are good to test your products. But the early adopters are key because these are the ones that are willing to try your product or buy your product before it's fully finished. And a lot of times, the early majority will not move or will not buy until it's proven by the early adopter. So you have this chasm here, and this is why popular book from George Moore is Crossing the Chasm. 70% of startups don't are not able to get to the early majority. So the book, in a lot of ways, explains how to cross that chasm, and that's I, I would say 70%, well, not 70, but maybe 50% of my entrepreneurial marketing class is about this. And you start with a niche and you completely overwhelm the services you provide that niche so that when your competitors see you, it's already late or they rather not go after you because you have a very small niche and it's not worth their while. But that niche could be what is a lot of times called the bowling pin strategy. That niche could be the pin that is going to knock down all the other pins. Okay, so this concludes products. So let's move on to promotions. So remember, promotions or the P for promotion is from the word promote. So it's everything you do to generate demand, advertising, personal selling, sales promotions, public relations, direct marketing, digital marketing. So often we call this the promotional mix. So this is the other class that I teach, which is called advertising management. It's everything related to this promotional mix. And often it has many different types of media. So media is how you deliver that message to your target audience. It could be traditional like TV and radio, billboard, sales, point of purchase, or point of sale, word of mouth, or the digital route. And a lot of times, this is if you do it in an integrated manner, it's called integrated marketing communications, and is when you're using many of these media, it's called omni-channel. So, whatever you're planning your communications, often we use what is called the 6M model. And the 6M model basically says, okay, who is going to be my target? So that's my market. My once I define that target market, then what is my objective? That's your mission. Then what message is going to be communicated? So this is the ad. Okay, let's call it the creative or the content. Media is how are you going to deliver that message? Money is how much is going to cost, and measurement is how are you going to assess the impact of that campaign. So, an example of an integrated campaign like we saw with the Super Bowl commercial for Rocket Mortgage. So we had Tracy Morgan, and throughout, so this was the best commercial in the Super Bowl in 2021. So it had a lot of earned media, meaning a lot of people were talking about it. And then look at all of their advertising, meaning their website, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everything, consistent message with Tracy Morgan, and key points, executional memorable points from the ads like the Bear or Batista, just the other celebrity. So in terms of evaluating advertising, we have these guidelines that are based on P&G's copy comment organizer. And I learned this 30 years ago and have built on it with my own twist. But one of the things that I remember and I love is it all starts with your gut feel. Do you like it or not? And then you start going through the strategic elements. Okay, there's one missing here. Reason to believe. Okay, or this is sometimes called the support. So why should you believe the benefit? The target, the selling line, sometimes also called the tagline. So this is kind of, well, can you see or visualize what is the unique value proposition? So this is what sets you apart from your competition in terms of all of these. Okay. Now, executionally, you have many, this is how the ad is done. So these are the strategic benefits or the strategic factors, which are the elements that go into the strategic positioning template. So if you guys remember, let's find it. So here we have our strategic positioning template. So if you remember, there is a template that wow, I really went a long way. Okay, here, not so. Um, so this is our template, right? So this is the Pantene example. And if you notice, the elements from strategic positioning are very similar to these. Okay, so let's see. Sorry, it's just that this is in the wrong order. This should go over here. This should go over here. And this should go over here. Yes, example of integrated campaign. Okay, Tracy Morgan, Rocket Mortgage, example, how to evaluate advertising, position statement. And then we have what is called the executional. So these are how does it keep you engaged, dramatization. Or you have situations of why is it that you can't remember the brand? Well, maybe the execution, maybe the story, the way it's being delivered overwhelms the brand. Casting celebrities are very important. They are the source that you associate with a brand. Is it consistent with what is called the brand character or the brand personality? Okay. Okay. What about the jingle? So jingle is the jingle, or it's another word for music. And can you use this in your radio advertising? Is it memorable? So there's a term called mnemonic. Let's see if I spelled it right. So it has mnemonic. Oh, there we go. Oh, thank God we have spell checkers. If you do a volume test, meaning put it on mute, can you understand the ad? Can you understand what is the unique product? I mean, the unique benefit, or when some people call sometimes the whole message, which is also often called the big picture, the big idea, or big picture. What about product shots? Do they have enough product shots? And often they're better at the beginning. Product and brand, okay? Um, so this could be the brand captions at the beginning and at the end. So, and then there is all different types of formats. So again, the sender of the message. So if we have a celebrity, right? This sender, the way that message is delivered through some sort of medium, so this could be Instagram or TikTok, and then you as the receiver, depending on how you decode that message, then you may have a response. Your response may be your interest to buy. And the great thing now with digital is you can even engage, right? You can engage back. So let's now switch to traditional promotions. Traditional promotions, okay, typically have what is called a push and a pull strategy. By the way, advertising is considered a pull strategy because a pull strategy, let's start with pull because pull is the easiest one. Pull means I go directly to the consumer and pull the product through all the different channels. So I'm the producer, let's say I'm Procter& and Gamble, you get a coupon from my website. And then you go to the different retailers with that coupon, redeem that coupon. So you're pulling the product, okay? Or I do advertising that you see on television or in social media, and based on that advertising, then you pull the product through retailers, wholesalers. By the way, it could be e-commerce too, but then it wouldn't be necessarily through channels, it would be direct. Push is exactly the opposite. I give the incentive, the promotion, everything to the trade, meaning the retailers, wholesalers, and intermediaries. They in turn have all sorts of promotional activities in their stores so that it gives an incentive for you to buy the product. So you're pushing the product through the reseller instead of the consumer pulling the product. So let's talk about some examples. So push would be like when you go into the supermarket. So for this, I'm actually going to go over here. So here we have, okay, this is Publix website, and this is their specials. And typically, when you go into the store, you have something called the weekly flyer. These are the weekly specials. So all of this is this one. You see? This is actually a picture I took when I went to the store. So for example, so here you have, right, all these specials, buy one, get one free, Tide, and all of these things are merchandise in the store. So you can see here you cannot see it because obviously this is just a special. But if you look at my slide, right, basically what you have is a display, okay? So we have Coca-Cola and look, this big display of Coca-Cola that clearly shows the buy one, get one free. So everybody comes into the store, and right at the entrance, you see what's being promoted. There is a shelf ad. You can even have a card ad, and there is all sorts of different types of advertising that can be done at the point of sale. So the company that I worked for many years, we did the floor ads, actually invented floor ads. So now you don't see them as often as in the past. So here is the display for Tostitos. So Tostitos, another brand that is a promotion. Sometimes they're at the end of the aisle or end caps. Okay. So here we have Cheerios. Now there is a very important reason why you need additional space for popular brands. So Cheerios is the leading brand in cereal. Because what happens if if you're giving a buy one, get one free, this is what's going to happen. You ran out of cereal. Look at this. That was cornflakes. They didn't have an end cap for cornflakes and they ran out of product. So when you have popular brand and you don't have those displays, you can have what is the biggest nightmare for a marketer: out of stocks. Because imagine you're investing all this money to get people to buy your product, and when they go, it's not there. And this is horrible for the retailer because if you're very loyal, you may end up buying it at another store. And here's for frozen, Tombstone Pizza. So frozen is a little different because you don't have that much space. So sometimes you have only like one freezer at the end of each aisle, and that's the one you're going to take advantage of. Then we have pull promotions. So pull promotions would be like coupons, coupons that you can go to a website like this one, coupons.com, and then you basically you can either print or you can add it to your app, and then you can basically redeem that coupon um, most of the time in any store if it's a manufacturer coupon. So here we have the famous Brand Saver. So Brand Saver is P&G's coupons that come, I believe, still once a month, right? So here, these are all coupons, okay? And you can redeem them anywhere. You can go to Target, Walmart, Publix, wherever, okay? So here we go. These are, you know what? I really, you can tell them still the P&G are at heart. Okay, I love this visual. All right. Oops, just created a new slide. There we go. Okay. Why didn't? It's okay. I think you get the point. Wanted to show the coupons. I guess I didn't flip it correct. All right, let's keep on going because otherwise we're gonna be here forever. Okay. Now here's the beauty of this thing. If you're really clever about this thing, let's say Crest, okay, or Head and Shoulders, right? So you have Head and Shoulders, so you save $3.25. Let's use a rounding. So here you have Pantene. Five, this is a coupon for save $2 on two Pantenes, right? So let's go. Now sometimes it doesn't show you the price. Let's see. Interesting. The same coupon. Okay. So a lot of retailers now have the coupon. But let's assume, let's just see one more thing. Let me put this on pause. I don't want to waste time. All right. So here we have, this actually worked out really well. So here we have an offer that if we buy two, okay, you get $3 off. So this is, let's see. Okay, so I put two in the cart. Okay, so let's see, two in the cart. How do I get to the cart? Okay. Okay, so you see the regular price for those two would have been $25. Okay, so $25. Let's just use regular number. So this is a regular price for two, but and we save $3. So let's put minus $3, right? So that's equal to let's call just to say $22, just to keep the numbers round, right? So far our discount is 3 divided by 25. 3 divided by 25, okay, is 12%. So far our discount is 12%. But we have another coupon that we got here, okay, and is for $5, and it says excludes travel size. So we can use this, okay. So now we use our coupon, okay, and now we are at $17. So our new total is $17, right? So five, 5 divided by 25, obviously is 20%, 20%. So overall, we saved 25 minus 17 equals 8. 8 divided by 25, 8 divided. So let's see, simple math. 8 divided by 25, we save 32%. Okay, 32%, right? So this is just the $8 that we saved is 32%. So this is called double couponing or stacking. All right. Okay. So let's see. So we also have things like public relations. We already talked about integrated communications. Oh. So the thing when it comes to advertising communications in general, if we have this funnel of effects or hierarchy of effects, which works like a funnel. The thinking stage is I can make you aware and even know my product or services. And if you have a lot of funds, this is, I would say, probably the easiest task, okay? Because it's the thinking or rational or cognitive stage. The tough part is how do I make you like my product or prefer my product? So this is called the feel stage, or convince you to actually purchase. So this right here is the tough part. And that's why often, companies, especially the ones that don't have a very strong brand recognition awareness, may use influencers because if you influencers will do this job. That's why they're called influencers. They influence liking, preference, conviction. And then the purchase, which is basically the behavior or the do stage. So the other thing that is important is there is a lot of emotional benefits or appeals. Okay, so you have safety, security, happiness. We already talked about some of these in the context of Coke. So what I'm noticing is we are almost 15 minutes and I haven't gotten to digital. So I'm going to create a separate video for digital. So you have all sorts of advertising objectives. It can be to inform, it could be to persuade, it could be reminder. And in advertising, usually the process starts with what is called a creative brief. Creative brief is a document that is developed by the brand so that the ad agencies can work on the creatives and how they're going to deliver that message. And these are the metrics that are typically used: reach, percentage of people in your target that are exposed, meaning that hopefully they saw, because being exposed is not the same thing as viewing. So often this is counted in terms of impressions or percentage of households. Frequency, how many times on average they were exposed to a message. Now, impact and engagement, that's a little bit more difficult to measure. Impact, sometimes use it in terms of like brand recall, and if they can remember the attributes of your brand. And ultimately, your return on investment or return on advertising spend or sales. Engagement, when it comes to digital, is a little easier because when it comes to engagement, you can see like how many times people clicked. And in terms of social media, you have likes, comments, and shares, which I'll talk about later on. Okay, so this is the Dove sketches. I'm going to show that. And sales, this is not going to be part of the exam because this is a separate thing. I'm going to do this in terms of when we cover retailing. Okay, so I'm gonna end this, let's call this review part one, which is basically the traditional promotions, let's call it like that. So in other words, television, all types of advertising, promotions in the trade, consumer promotions, trade promotions, push, pull, and then we have branding and products. So we have basically cover all that, and we'll do digital in a separate video.